Welcome to Thinking Biblically. This is Sunday, the 11th of January, in the year of our Lord 2026. Bye, Miss American Pie. Oh, my. Well, that we have a dictator in the United States. The Republic is currently dead or on life support, perhaps. We will see what happens. We will see if the Congress might perhaps remember their oath of office. So let me say something, first of all, about the Constitution. That there are some people out there who call themselves Christians, that want to establish a Christianity as a state religion. There's no such thing as state Christianity. State Christianity is not real Christianity. It's something else. It is a perversion. It is a political use of Christianity. Constantine began the establishment of it for his own political purposes. It's I've seen politicians since my childhood, and I know how they work. They use people. They are generally very self-interested. A politician that has a higher motivation than self that is not a narcissist is difficult to find. Narcissists are attracted to power. It's all about them. All right, so what we've got going on in the United States is shocking, and it's shocking the entire world. And the inability of the Congress to find out where they misplaced their cojones is. It's like, I lost them. Where are they? Did they roll under the desk someplace? They certainly are missing. The founders. Okay, the founders weren't really Christians. There might have been one or two, but not really. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been involved in a revolution against the king. And in some ways, the American Revolution was an extension or a continuation of the English Civil War between Congress, or the Parliament, and the king. And there was a lot of other factors in there. There was sort of a faddishness to the antiquities, to the Roman Republic, and you look at the architecture and the symbols of power in the Capitol building, they come from Rome. And all the monuments to, there is an American religion, and it's not Christianity. It's Americanism. The Mormons practice it. The Mormons believe that the Constitution is inspired by God, or which God? I don't know. They have multiple gods. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are three different gods that were once human beings, according to Mormonism. And there's an infinite number or an indefinite number of other deities that have ascended from mere human existence or something, maybe roaches or whatever, who knows, to godhood. It's sort of an Americanized version of the transmigration of the soul that you see in things like Hinduism, reincarnation. But reincarnation in Hinduism isn't necessarily upwards. It is the law of karma. As you sow, so shall you reap, is the biblical version of it, which is true. The Hindu version is not quite the same thing. We won't talk about the 300 plus million deities, which are all emanations of the one. So, there is intellectual Hinduism, and there's hope. The Thuggies, the expression the thugs. Thuggies was a Hindu cult. I can't remember which deity they sacrificed to, but she wasn't very nice. It actually, some of the facts in the Indiana Jones movie aren't totally made up. They're just Hollywood dramatized. All right, so yeah, there's Hinduism. You can find just about everything under it, from the cults that came over to America, like established the communes, like over in the state of Washington, and some of the others. The Hindus, the Beatles got into that stuff. Marilyn Ferguson, was that her name? The actress in the United States that got into, did a movie on it, where she says, "I am God," which is not the same thing as "I am God Almighty." The universal oneness of all things are one. That's part of Hinduism. It's what she said wasn't outrageous in Hinduism or New Age. It was for a Christian. For Donald Trump to say it, it's outrageous. He's not a Christian. He's publicly confessed, "I'm not a Christian." Now, I want to say something about the Constitution. I think God has given me a little bit of wisdom, more than some people apparently possess. But the Constitution, there's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits me from freely practicing my religion of Christianity. There's nothing in the Constitution that interferes with the Lordship of Jesus Christ for Christians. Does it acknowledge him? No, it doesn't. Do the founders acknowledge the God of the Bible? No, they don't. They don't. They have a vague deistic / utilitarian Christendomity or something, whatever you want to call it. Christendomity. Cultural religion, which is not Christianity. But there's nothing, I can live under the Constitution. It doesn't cause problems. Has the United States government ever persecuted Christians? Yes, repeatedly, especially small groups they can get away with. The Amish have been very persecuted in the United States. Christians that have asserted their right not to participate in war have been persecuted by our government without mercy. But that's not because of the Constitution. The Constitution does not give them the right of involuntary servitude by drafting people and forcing them to commit acts of violence and murder, which often occurs in war. I mean, basically, you're shooting somebody that's not guilty of a crime. So I don't want to participate in that. Okay? I don't have to, according to the Constitution. Congress has often acted contrary to the Constitution. The courts have often acted contrary to the Constitution. But that doesn't mean there's a problem with the Constitution. There's a problem with human beings. And people that twist it or aren't particularly literate. The quality of people that end up on the Supreme Court they are certainly not divines. Just because you put a black robe on doesn't mean you aren't as dumb as a stone. I mean, and sometimes they manifest that. Not generally, but sometimes you wonder. And it hasn't gotten better. And of course, the courts affirmed slavery, and they've done everything. They are just usually 9 people with black robes on. That doesn't give them wisdom. There's not an endowment of wisdom that is given them. We have to remember that human beings are fallen. The Constitution doesn't, for a pluralistic society where you have people from all over the world that are not united by anything really, because biblically a nation is an ethnos. So you have a ethnically homogenous group that are connected by family and history and everything else. There's no such thing in the United States. Generally somewhat European, but not so much anymore. And there's a lot of, minority groups here. It's like the African Americans civil rights movement. I mean, they were Jim Crow was an abominable thing, and it persecuted genuine Christians as much as it did, white people, European ancestry people that would fraternize with African peoples that all happened to live here, all were citizens, were treated in some ways worse in the South, often murdered by the Klan, which often included the local sheriff and his deputies. So yeah, there's been a lot of things, but that's not the fault of the Constitution. The Constitution is a reasonable framework. I don't think God has a problem with it. It's a reasonable framework for people to live together under some people that are willing to live together in peace under a reasonable framework that recognizes liberty and rights. It doesn't give liberty and rights, it recognizes them. And it was put in the Constitution on the insistence of the southern states because they didn't really trust the northerners and their assurance that the Constitution by itself was sufficient because of human beings. The sinfulness of human beings. That's why the biblical doctrine of the fallenness of man, you can't understand what goes on without that, and without that, you're very vulnerable. But yeah, the Constitution is the federal government. It is the federal government. If it was to be, in retrospect, the southern states would have insisted on a clause that permits them to remove themselves. But that was implied. I mean, they would have thought, they wouldn't have occurred to them if they knew that it was going to be twisted and used by others to force them to do things. They would have said no. The Southerners knew they had a problem with slavery. There was an inconsistency with the Constitution there, but there was other means to go about that. Especially the Baptists in the South, there was more abolition societies in the South than there were in the North because they had to deal with it. And slavery was a rich man's toy, just like Teslas and private rockets. Oh, there is some news that I want to show first. Where is that? Here, you see, could X be banned in the UK? I sure hope so. Everybody should ban X. It's about time that Musk got his got a haircut, really short. There should be limits on the amount of wealth a person can have. The Constitution doesn't foresee certain things or expected the Congress to deal with that. There is no right under the Constitution for unlimited wealth and run your own space program and cheating customers and things like that. But all that is normally states that are responsible for that. The Constitution spells out it is the federal government. It is specifically, it limits the authority of the federal government too. That's its main purpose, to create a central government authority, but limit it to specifically the delegated powers of the Constitution, powers delegated to the federal government by the states. That's why the South thought they could secede, because the Constitution and the federal government is a creation of the states. Its power derives from the states, and the power of the states and the federal government derive from the people. Now, those that get into power usually immediately forget that. Who they work for. Because they're usually con men and con women that are bent on pursuing their own interests and their own power because of the fallenness of humanity. But someone has decided the Constitution has no restraints. The Constitution defines the power of the. It doesn't really deal with the court very much because the court's not considered important by the founders. The center, and it's not three co-equal branches. That is mythology. Read the document. The Congress is the main power. They make the laws. They pass tax legislation. Only the House, which has to do with the English Civil Wars. The Civil War in the 1860s, or 1600s, middle of 1600s, was between the Parliament and the King, because the Magna Carta forced the King to recognize that he didn't have unlimited power. And I hope you know about the Magna Carta. And the king, what happened was the king wanted to get funding. He had only the Parliament could authorize taxes, and the king needed money for a war, and the Parliament didn't want to authorize it, didn't want to fund it, so he decided to go around them and impose user fees and other things like tariffs. Just violate the Magna Carta, violate the separation of powers in England between the Parliament and the King. And the Parliament was supposed to represent the people. You had the Parliament, and then you had the House of Lords, which represented the nobility, and then you had the King, and the Magna Carta was really between the nobility and the king, and they brought that about. But there was that civil war about that, and ended up with the foolish King Charles being shortened by a head. But then Parliament was unable to function properly. It's a disaster. But no taxation without representation is a slogan from that. That's why the American Revolution, in some sense, was a continuation of the English Civil War. I would like to see Trump's X be banned because X is a sewer. It is a absolute sewer. And what this is all about there's a firestorm out there now because Grok, Musk's version of AI. Musk was part of the founders of OpenAI, and then it's just like he was involved in founding PayPal and Zip2 before that. I know what Zip2 is. And then he'd sell out and he'd get rich. And what Grok is his current version of AI. And when they came out, is available with two modes. There's a regular mode and a spicy mode. If you want nasty Grok, any AI can do that pretty much if you tell it to. AI is so stupid. These people have deceived themselves. Oh, look at it. We've created a god. It can speak. We need to give it agency so it can put to death all those that will not take the number that it's decreed. And that's coming next. Or maybe a little bit later, I hope. But back to the Constitution. That is the federal government. That is the government. You have the Congress, but those are just people that occupy a position under the Constitution. They're under the Constitution. When they violate the Constitution, they have committed treason and they violated their oath of office. When they oppose the Constitution. So here's what I was looking for. I was looking for this junk here. I had a lot of trouble trying to find a video with this quote from Trump. I think there might have only been a photographer there, because there's another problem. Okay, I generally use DuckDuckGo because I don't like Google very much, but search engines have gone to the devil. And I kept getting all the stories that came from MSN, like the whole page, nothing but MSN. And you go and click on it, and it would have a quote from Trump, but the story wasn't about what Trump said. Or they have a video, and it was not about what Trump said. I don't go to MSN for news. So, in other words, why did they do that? Because they're getting paid for it. Search engines that take money and create listings based on how much money you pay them are not trustworthy. They're just like AI is not trustworthy. You can't trust people that aren't acting in your interest. The original search engines were usually run by universities. Those were the days. You know, you could have a public utility search engine, a public internet, and public health care that serve the community. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. You know, local radio stations, until these capitalists put their own people in power again, local radio stations were always locally owned and served the local community. They were private, but you'd have they'd have a DJ there, and they'd have their programming, and it was locally sourced programming. Those don't exist anymore. The radio stations are still there. They're all owned by these huge corporations. And they serve the interest. They don't serve the interests of the local community anymore. They don't even have anybody there that's live anymore. So in a local disaster, they're useless. And of course, they've all been trying to destroy public radio and public broadcasting. There was a reason those were created, to try to balance some of the things out so it wasn't all corporate. You know, so I have an issue with, because my wife and I would do Sunday church service, or actually it was me and my wife assisting me. She didn't do the preaching. She helped distribute communion to whoever desired it. Unless they had no idea what it was. It was like trying to avoid that. But, you know, you have all kinds in a nursing home. But the county eventually sold it, because the county accountants were, for years, were putting forward referendums to try to sell the nursing home. For a long time, it was making money because, you know, the state funding that comes in for Medicaid, they had a surplus, and the county officials would take the surplus from the nursing home, and rather than keep it to take care of the nursing home and maintenance and all that stuff, they would use it for other things. And then when the state stopped paying things, they had a problem. They just, you know, I can't remember the why. The state budget issues in Illinois, they had spent money on other things. And the money wasn't coming in to cover that stuff. The state was very slow in paying their bills. And vultures came in, vulture capitalists, particularly this one from Stokey, Illinois. They have no interest in the local residents here at all. They were just looking at an opportunity to buy up these places cheap because they were in distress. And the county had sold out, not so much for that, but because the building needed considerable maintenance. It needed a new roof, new windows, parking lot needed to be paved, all this stuff, and they didn't have the funds because they had already stolen all the funds for other purposes. So they wanted to sell it, and they did, and then these private vultures came in, and they eventually went out of business. But the deterioration of the care was very evident. Because the owners didn't give a damn about people, especially the people here. It's not their community. Things like that, hospitals, nursing homes they always used to be community things. Cared for by the local community. Some things were much better than they were today. Remember public utilities? They couldn't gouge you because they were controlled by your government, your local government. And you could go down there and beat on the door and say, "What are you doing?" You could make life uncomfortable for them if they were misbehaving. You want to get reelected, or do you want to go into an enforced retirement? Or the state prison, which is a tradition in Illinois for governors. That's their retirement accommodations often. But yeah, it's we have lost so much. Capitalism, unrestrained capitalism, is a great evil because it is the exaltation of greed. That's what it really is. Capitalism is about the accumulation of the means of production and the finances, too, of a production. It is a concentration of power in the hands of individuals or corporations now. And it is not a good thing. It is predatory. The people that build these huge corporations don't do it in the public interest. They do it in their personal interest. And this is an example of when you forget God's revelation, especially about the sinfulness of humanity, you do foolish things. And the problem is when you forget about your own sinfulness, and that's not moderated by a religion that deals with it, you've got a problem. We all have a problem. Now we've got Donald Trump. So I had trouble finding something, so this is what I don't know who this is, just off YouTube. Try to find his quote. Again, it apparently wasn't videoed, but it was recorded. So let's go here.
In a wide-ranging interview with the New York Times, Donald Trump has said international law will not restrain him. But don't worry, something else will.
Do you see any checks on your power on the world stage? Is there anything that could stop you if you wanted to?
Yeah, there's one thing. My own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop. And that's law. Very good. I don't need international law. I'm not looking to hurt people.
Really?
Ash, welcome to the show. Governing the relation.
Okay, really? What about all those people in those boats? What about the people of Gaza? Trump is self-deluded. Does he actually believe he's not looking to hurt people? Oh, that's nuts. Yeah, he is. But he fits. He's publicly identified himself with what the Apostle Paul calls the man of sin or the man of lawlessness. Before the return of Christ, this is not a particular individual. This is a category of people. And he talks about how nasty people become in 2 Timothy chapter 3. Just in the last days, difficult times will come. And he gives a list of words describing what the people will be like. Just nasty, treacherous, deceivers, murderous, just awful. And this is the removal of restraints that God has, because before the return of Christ, God has removed whatever he's been using to restrain things. And it could be a number of things, including law. But some people have, it's an area of speculation. There's no obvious answer to it. But one of the things we know it has to do with law could be one because it refers to a masculine word. The pronoun there, that's translated he, rather than it, refers to a masculine word. And since it's a man of lawlessness, namas, which is the Greek word for law, which is masculine, which would, in other words, it fits the grammar, could be a viable option there. God's spirit isn't because the word spirit is feminine. It's a word gender. It doesn't mean that the spirit of God is feminine. If you try to learn a different language, you're probably aware of this. English speakers generally aren't. We're ignorant. English is not a gendered language. Gender is just a category of word families. So you often have masculine, feminine, and neuter. Some languages don't have the neuter. If you've ever taken Latin or Spanish, I don't know about German. English is sort of Germanic, sort of. It's hodgepodge. Well, Donald Trump, no law above me. I don't recognize any law, which is what he's demonstrating in his, like it's the White House. I heard now he's going to do something with the other side of the White House, the West Wing. So he's already demolished the East Wing for his ballroom. The White House is not the president's personal possession. It's the people's house. It belongs to the American people. Donald Trump did not even ask permission to do this. That would require legislation from the Congress. The president is required to faithfully execute the laws of the Congress and uphold the Constitution. He has no authority to do anything else. He has no authority to start wars. Somebody might bring up Jefferson. Jefferson did launch a naval action against the Barbary pirates, but the Barbary pirates were seizing American vessels and American citizens and selling them into slavery. So he went there to protect Americans. And the Congress didn't disapprove of that. It wasn't war against a nation. It was a police action to protect Americans. Not the British, not the Israelis. Americans that were being, and pirates do have a tendency to murder people too. So this was a violence being done to Americans and American ships, American flag, and on the seas. So yes, he had a duty for that, and it was not there was no war against a state. The Barbary pirates weren't a state. So, if Trump was doing something against drug gangs coming across the border, armed border terrorism, there is terrorism on the Mexican-Texas border. I'm sure it goes along the whole thing. You have like MS-19 and others there that actually rule over the local authorities on both sides of the border by terror. But that's not really what he's interested in, is it? So, yeah, there's always, in fact, just a few miles. There's a whole string of military forts once upon a time along the border because of cross-border raids. Pancho Villa, for example, coming across the border, and then General Pershing going to pursue him. But, of course, you couldn't do anything about it because the American army couldn't find whatever down there in Mexico. And the locals, Pershing went across with a convoy of trucks. If you know anything about the border, if you've lived down there, you got to be kidding. I mean, most of that territory you can't hardly negotiate on horseback because of the prickly pear and the cat's claw and everything else. Trucks. It's difficult to even go up. It was always difficult even to go up the Rio Grande River in a steamboat. It was very difficult. So, yeah. Of course, Pershing wasn't successful, other than, hey, look, these trucks sort of worked. It was one of those failed expeditions. The other expedition that was successful was the Mexican-American War, and that was deliberately provoked by President Polk by putting a military force into Mexico, into Mexican territory, across the river from Monterrey. No, not Monterrey. I can't think of the city that's down there, almost on the mouth. Is it Matamoros? Not Monterrey. Matamoros, I think. Anyway, there was a Mexican city on the south side of the river. The river wasn't the border. That was up more like San Antonio. And at that time, this was after the Mexican-Texas wars, after the Alamo. But the Mexican territory was not delineated by the Rio Grande River. And so Polk put a small force of soldiers or Marines, soldiers I believe it was, on the north side of the river, right across the river from the Mexican city there. And the Mexican commander there said, I suppose I ought to check this out. So he sent us a patrol across the river, and there was an American patrol out, and of course what happened was they started shooting at each other. But it was a deliberate provocation. I mean, of course, Americans have been doing this ever since. So you put an American force in somebody else's country, and then you claim the country. How dare they shoot at us? Oh, they've killed one of our soldiers. Oh, we need to bomb them. We need to take their government out of power. What were your soldiers doing in the middle of their country? Americans are not the smartest people on the planet. That rah-rah patriotism stuff, it's bad. It clouds your judgment. And Americans are supposed to be knowledgeable and able to judge right from wrong. Otherwise, you're not capable of electing officials anyway. You'll elect demagogues. Demagogues. Look that up. Rabble rousers. That'd be another name for it. So Trump has disowned the Constitution. He has fulfilled the words of Paul, and I don't believe this is about a particular individual, but a category of individuals. That's called the man of sin or man of lawlessness, and it's in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And Paul writes there that before Christ returns, an apostasy will come. Christians will fall away from Christ, and the man of sin or the man of lawlessness will be revealed. Often this is associated with a figure called the Antichrist, but the Bible really doesn't talk about one individual. That is a mythology created by people like John Darby and C.I. Scofield, and others. I mean, there's lots. John said in his day there was already many antichrists that had arisen. Joseph Smith is an antichrist. Benjamin Netanyahu is an antichrist. The term antichrist is used in the Bible by John in 1 John, and is a person who denies the Father and the Son. Denies essentially the Trinity. Unitarians are Antichrist. Oneness Pentecostals are Antichrist. Jehovah's Witnesses are Antichrist. Muslims are, but I don't think they understand the concept of the Son in Christianity. I suspect Muhammad had in mind God creating children the way he did supposedly, or the way gods did in Greek and Roman mythology. They literally came down and impregnated a woman sexually. That is not the Christian idea. And the idea that Jesus being the Son of God in a literal sense like that is actually much more than the reality. It was much more greater than that. But that God would sexually impregnate some female, and that I just suspect that Muhammad had mistaken concepts on a number of things. He had some exposure to Christianity and some exposure to Judaism, and whatever the Jews were telling him the Jews are explicitly Antichrist. Judaism is explicitly Antichrist. Islam is not hostile to Christ. This is a difference. Americans don't understand this. They don't know it. Rabbinical Judaism, Talmudic Judaism, is explicitly hostile to Christ. And they obviously deny the Son. They deny that Jesus is the Son of God. Now this Judaism split in the first century especially after 70 AD, because the other groups were gone. Between rabbinical Judaism, the Pharisees, and Christians. Those were the Jewish groups that survived. And the Christians dropped the distinction between Jews and Gentiles. So they were now no longer an exclusively Jewish sect. They were a global sect following Christ. The New Testament explicitly denies the role of ethnicity. It denies that God makes a distinction between Jews and Gentiles. In Christ, there is no distinction. There is no ethnic or gender distinction in Christ. Explicitly states that. If you didn't know that, you haven't spent enough time reading the New Testament. All right, so Donald Trump has deliberately put himself over the Constitution. He doesn't recognize any law. He doesn't recognize any restraint on him other than his own morality. We're all aware of Donald Trump's morality, which is normally referred to as immorality, because he's contrary to any reasonable understanding of morality. How many women have accused him of sexual assault or rape? Let alone the fact that he's now on his third wife, which is more of a personal bauble than an actual wife. He's just he's just part of his bling. Or haven't you noticed that? And the word out of the White House is that she doesn't really have tender feelings toward him. The word used was hates. I'm sure there's a prenup involved there. She's just something. Donald Trump uses people, including women. I think we can all agree on that. I'm sure many people on the left say, I don't fit into left or right. I hope I don't. There's at times I've been swayed, and because of certain acts, one side will do something just crazy, and then I'll sometimes react in the other way too far. But yeah, in Christ, no. So the Constitution, if the Constitution is the federal government. That's my point. The Constitution is the federal government, and Donald Trump opposes the Constitution. He's declared that he's not bound by anything other than his own morality and his own mind, both of which are gone. And where are the cojones of the Congress? Listen, do they roll under their desks and they can't find them, or what? My apologies to the female members of Congress, but you know what I mean. It's an expression, and you know what it means. And where is the Congress? Where is their courage? Where is their oath of office? They have an obligation, not just a moral obligation, but a legal obligation. They swore an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Donald Trump is an enemy of the Constitution. He doesn't care about it. He is ruling as a tyrant. And he surrounded himself with toadies that are encouraging him in this and probably using him, just like Biden was probably being used by those around him, as an extension of their own power. See, they derive their power from the presidency. Have you noticed the incredible arrogance when Bondi or the head of the FBI, what's his name, have been called before Congress? They're hostile arrogance to the Congress. How dare you question me? See, they have adopted the same attitude as Donald Trump. And he's surrounded himself with sycophants like that. Toadies. There's other names for that. Has to do with an unwashed nose. What are you going to do, Congress? He's making public statements that he's unbound by law. He refuses to submit to the authority of the Constitution, which is his only. Well, the Constitution says this is what you have the authority to do and no other. Of course, the Congress has ignored that for years. The chickens have come home to roost. I mean, if you were to you could write up a 10,000-page indictment of the president easily. Everything he does is a crime now. He's an enemy of the Constitution, which means he's an enemy of the federal government, which is he's an enemy of all the institutions of the Constitution. See, the government is the structure. It's not the individuals. And he's tearing it down. He's destroying the federal government. He's destroying the Justice Department. He's destroying the agencies of the executive branch and the Congress because he's emasculated them all by the party politics is destroying this country, destroying our liberties. The taking money from what are essentially foreign agents, which would include so-called Americans that have foreign citizenship in Israel, these billionaires that are using their money to bribe the president and bribe Congress into supporting actions that are contrary to the interests of the United States and contrary to the American Constitution, including trying to drag us into foreign wars, trying to shed American blood. That's not our problem. At least Reagan had the smarts that when all those Marines got killed to get out. Calling them peacekeepers doesn't make them peacekeepers. They're still occupiers. And Donald Trump, with his public presentation of his plans for Gaza, Trump world, with a what, 60 cubit high image of a golden Trump? Have you seen the AI generated video that the Trump administration has put out about his dreams for Gaza? So he's going to build a Trump version of Las Vegas on the bones and ashes of the Palestinians. There's been well over 100,000 murdered in Gaza. And don't say anything about October 7th. I will give you an answer on that. Trump is full partners with Netanyahu in genocide. Full partners. The Israelis could not do what they've done without American support. America has been supporting an evil, wicked country for far too long. It's sort of an American pattern. Constitution doesn't authorize that. But again, I want to make clear, everybody understand, the Constitution is the federal government. And those that are trying to destroy that are trying to destroy the government of the American people. The Constitution is the only is the limits on the power of the government to abuse us, the citizens. We know if they have the opportunity, they will do it. Just like they will persecute Christians when they have the opportunity. The Amish have been persecuted over and over and over again because they're a small, quiet group and they won't even engage in lawsuits. They're non-resistant. But they will refuse to serve in the military, which has led to real persecution of them in cases. There is no constitutional authorization for a draft either. Lincoln was an enemy of the Constitution when it suited him. The idea of forcing people into the amendment against the involuntary servitude was passed after the Civil War. But the idea that you could draft citizens into service against their will is contrary to the Bill of Rights, even without the involuntary servitude amendment. The right to freely practice your religion. The Amish have never been a threat to anyone. But when they refuse to serve in the military and commit what they considered murder, contrary to the teaching of Jesus, the Amish turn the other cheek seriously. Not that the Amish are perfect. I'm familiar enough with them to realize there's problems there. But they're trying to live according to their religion, and they've been bounced back and forth between the Canadian and the American border several times. Different groups that are just trying to follow Christ in their own particular way, which is often admirable. And then Americans, of course, media comes around and does TV reality shows like the Amish Mafia, knowing that the Amish would not sue them for slander. Because that was what it was. That whole program was slander against the Amish. American media put that out. Corporate media. But the corporations now own the Congress, along with the Israelis and the Israeli interest groups, the Zionist lobby. I want to make it clear, there's an awful lot of Jews that oppose this stuff. The ultra-Orthodox oppose this stuff. They're being persecuted by their own government in Israel for refusing to serve in the military. They believe they're supposed to serve Yahweh, God. Do I agree with their religion? I agree with the God of their religion. Not their interpretation of things, but the idea that forcing the Israeli government has no claim to represent Judaism. Just like Trump, calling Trump a Christian. That would be crazy. He's even confessed that I'm not a Christian, he said the other day. I'm not a Christian. He's talking to Christians. He said, "Oh, you lovely Christians, my lovely Christians," something like that. I'm not a Christian, but he's a user. He uses people. He's a narcissist. Narcissists use people. They have no genuine affection. They are fallen human beings that are particularly twisted. There's different degrees of fallenness. I mean, there are people that can display characteristics that you could call noble. They aspire to higher things. You can believe in God and not be truly a Christian. But then there's those that are totally given over to the dark side. We have one in Washington. He's surrounded himself with darkness. Donald Trump is a disciple of Satan. That's what he is. Satan is the original narcissist. He set himself above God. He set himself above all authority and decided that he should rule. Just like Donald Trump. That's why I say he's Satan's disciple. Following the same pattern as Satan. The same bloody, murderous pattern. Jesus said of the devil, he was a liar. When he lies out of his own nature. And he was a murderer from the beginning. The words of Jesus Christ. And he said to some Pharisees, "You do the deeds of your father, the devil." Because they were seeking to kill him. They were seeking to kill Jesus Christ. They were angry because he exposed their sinfulness and their hypocrisy. He told the truth because he is the truth. Will America recover itself? Will the Congress find their cojones? Because they have the lawful remedy. The times they impeached Trump in the past seem to be politically motivated. Right now, the Congress, Republicans and Democrats, need to unite and remove this man. If they want to be nice about it, they could insist that Donald come to the Congress for examination to answer some questions about the things he has been doing and saying, and seeing what his true attitude toward the Constitution is. And if he doesn't repent, then they are obligated by their oaths and the Constitution to remove him, because he is manifestly an enemy of the Constitution, which is the federal government. A far greater danger than any foreign power in this world today. Can you not see that? Or are they so obsessed with their own position and trying to keep their own place in Congress? if Donald Trump has his way, you will have no place. Because you are simply an impediment. And Donald Trump has no loyalty to anyone but himself. Can you not see that? He will destroy you like he will destroy those people in those boats, just like he kidnapped Madero, who was no threat to the United States, on trumped up charges. Well, Trump has given certainly a new meaning to that. Fabricated charges that have no reality to them. He's a pirate and has manifested that. Do you want to serve a pirate? What happens to people that serve a pirate? Pirates are murderous, treacherous, evil to the core. Only interested in what they can steal. Only interested in rape, plunder, and murder. That's why they used to punish them the way they did. To make an example of people like that. Well, welcome to Sunday morning. What's the date? The 11th of January. Is this land going to remain America, or will it become Trump world? Will there be elections this fall? Congress has to act before Trump consolidates more power. He's already working to bribe the military. The Congress has to stand up and assert their authority and call on the military to refuse to obey unlawful orders. Any orders, any war or action not authorized by the Congress in accordance with the Constitution is unauthorized. Any expenditure of money or any tax that does not originate in the House of Representatives is unauthorized and a violation of the Constitution. Back to basics, people. Back to Civics 101. Those who follow Trump, MAGA, those who follow Trump, Congress, those who follow Trump, those who support him are following the devil to hell. You are on the broad road that leads to destruction. And unless you turn around and find a different route, you will perish with Trump. God is judge, and God is not mocked. As a man sows, so shall he reap. Remember that. Those that are faithful in little are faithful in much. Those that are unfaithful in little are unfaithful in much. Trying to derive power from joining the Trump bandwagon will take you to hell.